Hello, everyone. My name is John Norlin. I'm one of the co-founders of Character Strong, and I am also a parent. And I know that these conversations that we've been having around ways that we can support a family, specifically around the topic of mental health, is not only important, near and dear to my heart as a parent. And so I'm here with Dr. Clayton Cook. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, John. I'm a parent too, of two girls, proud parent, very proud parent, and someone who worries about my own daughter's mental health. Professionally speaking, I'm a licensed psychologist. My training was as a school psychologist, but I pivoted and worked in a variety of settings to really deepen my knowledge around mental health and the things we can do, both from a clinical standpoint in terms of services we can help kids access, to what do we do in terms of a home that we can put in place supports that enable our kids to be as mentally healthy as possible.
Yeah, I think a fun, before we dig in, Clay, on the topic, a fun maybe tone set is at Character Strong, we talk a lot about, social emotional learning, which obviously mental health is connected to that, character development and humility we talk a lot about in different facets. And I would say, if you want the ultimate humility challenge, become a parent. Because you could think that you've got it figured out until you become a parent, and then you realize you got nothing figured out. And I just have very much appreciated our connection over the years. First meeting in the work of education, serving schools, serving students, but then even having the honor to have gone to where you live currently, met your family, seen you interact with your daughters. I love when you say a proud parent. I would say the same. I'm a proud parent of my son, and yet numerous times early on, I remember asking you, all right, when it comes to this, there's got to be a behavioral psychology strategy here. Help me out, man. And so, just with that, I've always loved your ability to bring both the theory, right? Here's the different studies, but really the practical. What does that actually look like, play out? Because sometimes it can be really heady up here, but how does it actually look in action? And so, with that frame, maybe we could talk a little bit about this. When you think about the last 9 months, lots been going on in the world, including this, thing called a worldwide pandemic. And maybe first, what have you seen? I mean, around the topic of mental health, this is a big topic right now for a reason. What have you been seeing? What have you been hearing kind of across the board before we dig into maybe some of our fears as parents?
Yeah, I think at first it's normal adjustments and reactions aren't mental health problems. They're normal adjustments and reactions. When we have disruptions, it creates some degree of discomfort. A lot of that discomfort is justified and proportional to the situation. It's not a problem, even though you don't like what's happening and it feels uncomfortable. That's a normal human reaction to when things change. There's uncertainty, there's loss in terms of how our previous routines were as we knew them. And then there's reactions that are intense. They become disproportional. They linger and they start to impair and get in the way of important life functioning, daily life functionings. And that's when we don't have to call it a name, a disorder. It just is, that's when a support, we got to put in place a support.
Yeah.
Now there's things we can do proactively in home environments to set our kids up to handle situations that happen. And that's if we were on our A game and we did things proactively, but there's also things we can do responsively or reactively once we notice a young person struggling, and how do we help them better manage that situation and turn it into a learning opportunity, so future things that happen, they may be better equipped to handle those the next time, and they start to build some degree of fluency. But what we're seeing is this is differentially impacting kids. Some kids are, despite everything that's going on, they're doing really well.
Yeah.
And some kids, they have mild to moderate struggles here and there, but overall they're pretty well. And then we know some kids are struggling more. And so when we have kids, even if you're a parent and you have two kids, you start to realize, whoa, they're different. One of my kids might need more supports than another based on the way they're experiencing and the types of thoughts and feelings that are impacting how they're functioning. And so we see a bunch of variability in terms of everything that's played out and how it's impacting kids' mental health.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was going to say, do you think, are we hearing any consistencies in terms of, is it environment or other things, right? But you say even like where you've got two kids, they might be in a similar environment, but one's experiencing it much differently. I want to maximize, because I know these always go so quick, and because I love when you talk both proactively and reactively, there's things that we could be doing before you go into even some of those like strategies, things that we could be doing. When you look at your own two young daughters, what ages now?
5 and 8.
Okay, 5 and 8. Wow, 8 already. Oh my gosh. And I have a 6-year-old who is starting kindergarten in completely virtual, right? The whole year will probably be virtual. For you right now, what's your biggest fear as you see what we're in right now, for your own daughters?
Yeah, I think, one is that they continue to have kind of positive affect. And so as parents, we want our kids to have positive affect. And what we mean by that is they're happy, they're having fun, they're excited about stuff. And when we see kids that start to disappear from kids based on what's happening, because things have changed and we've taken them out of their normal and put them in a different situation. And many of the things, they're not as connected as they were to some friends, or virtual learning isn't as fun as being in an interactive, dynamic, live classroom context. From a parent standpoint, we got to start to think about how do we start to engage our children in experiences that we have control over, that can, promote positive affect, that, things can still be fun and exciting, but just looking. And that's what I was worrying about, like with everything's going on, my daughters they're going to hate school, and then, they're going to have that, and that's going to impact their well-being, and they're going to constantly go in. And so that's one thing that I feared a lot about, is they would start to have more of a negative affect or negative feelings towards a lot of things that are going to go on, and starts to, alter the way they perceive things and take in their experiences in ways that, undermine their well-being in the long run.
And I think that's like one of the big conversations right now, right? Is even at times when people are thinking rationally, sometimes you wonder about like the different, like, it's the, obviously the social distancing, and we see a lot of times shutdowns of different things, but then it's pushing up against this conversation around what's the impact on also families and mental well-being and our students, and in school or out of school, hybrid or fully virtual, or all of those different conversations. This has to play obviously a big role in that, right? As these fears right here, and what's the long-term effect up against obviously many of the negative, things that we see if we don't social distance and all of that. That's where it feels like a lot of times like a lose-lose.
Yeah.
Would you agree in what people are seeing? Yeah. I would echo that in terms of my fear. My fear is, and I think part of it is almost maybe a little bit of a gift, in that my son knows preschool, he was in person, but he doesn't really know anything other. Like I think for some of his friends who maybe have already been in like the school setting where they were in kindergarten in person, or first or second grade, and they've experienced that it almost seems in some cases like more of a loss, whereas he doesn't know much different. So Zoom was fun a little bit, but it is that worry of like, the first day where I came home and he looked like that Zoom fatigue, and that he wasn't excited. And that fear comes as a parent of like, I just want him to love school, love learning, and I don't want him to lose that. And there's no reason why a young child should lose that, right? And maybe more hyper aware right now of paying attention to that than maybe normal, where it might just be if there's social things happening at school, but now it's like really paying attention to that. So, well, taking that idea, let's go back to the proactive, reactive, piece, the things that we could be doing to help to mitigate. What are some things, if you were to think about it practically, and maybe what things that we could be looking for as parents when you put on your hat as not just dad, but behavioral psychologist?
Oh yeah. I mean, I feel like the first, from a mental health promotion, we're trying to enable our kids to be as mentally healthy as possible, is the basics. The basics are physiology, like physically, is the kid in a good place? So sleep and physical activity, regular sleep, helping the child get the sleep they need to be a healthy human physically. Everything is more intense and harder from a thinking and a feeling standpoint when we're sleep deprived. And we all know that's true of ourselves. It really impacts kids' ability to regulate themselves in the face of life situations when they're not getting the basics like sleep and physical activity. We don't know the true prevalence of mental health disorders and problems among kids after controlling for sleep problems because they so co-vary. Yeah. So one of the basics, once we wash out sleep and physical activity as a source, what we have left are like thoughts and feelings things where we can really start to think about modeling the practices ourselves. So modeling, identifying an unhelpful way to think about what's going on and repurpose that to be a more helpful, hopeful, and optimistic way to think about even a pretty tough or crummy situation.
Yeah.
The feeling part is really helping and modeling the use. So just like I can't make my kid get over it, but I can sure as heck model it and provide that learning through vicarious learning. They're socially learning from a main adult in their life, their parent, the caregiver, the guardian who spends the most time with them. And so those are the two kind of proactive basics, like really get these kind of physical things, sleep and physical activity, and then the modeling piece and modeling, like identifying when we say unhelpful things and we noticing it and then repurposing it to be a more helpful and hopeful way to talk about a particular challenging situation or a crummy situation that happened.
Even coming back, so I think obviously sleep and physical activity, I'm like, oh, you're talking about our kids, you're talking about me. What's the practical move there? Is it sometimes you think about, okay, is it more important that we're waking up at a similar time each day, that we're going to bed, or is there any just practical there of what about sleep and the importance of it? Obviously number of hours, is it more important elementary? I don't want to assume anything here or assume people listening.
You're about to get me on my soapbox, man, because this is work we are.
I know you have. Yeah.
Right now, and we have what's called the reset model, and it's how we actually promote kids getting good sleep. Yep. So, first of all, there's kind of a formula for good sleep. You got to get the right amount. So biologically, that's developmentally determined.
Okay.
So, kids typically need around 10 to 11 hours. Pre-adolescents to adolescents need roughly 9 to 10 hours, closer to 10 hours. And so then that's a matter to be able to get that amount of sleep. It's impacted by your bedtime and wake time. So you got to set those things. And then we have a body clock. It's called a circadian rhythm. That thing has to get in sync, because if you don't get in sync and have consistent sleep, so you got to get the right amount, but then you need consistent across each day of the week. That's like going in from a jet from LA to New York on the weekends, and your body doesn't know where it's at, whether it should be sleeping or be awake. And that decreases immune system. We can't manage our emotions better. Stressors get kind of exacerbated. We can't think clearly. And sleep's like the 800-pound gorilla that impacts everything. Right. And then the reset model is routines. We have to have good sleep routines, including our bedtime and wake time. We got to have routines that get us prepared to fall asleep. And we have to have routines during the day that help us. So when we go to lay down at night, that we can actually fall asleep. Then the E for reset is environment. We need create good sleep environments that are free from distraction. They're dark, they're cool, they're quiet, and they're comfy. And so our sleep environment impacts whether we're able to fall and stay asleep. The more light, the harder it is to get to deep sleep. The more noises, the more we're aroused. And so we can create a healthier sleep environment. Then the S and E is stress and emotions. Sometimes kids have a lot of things that come up for them that they start worrying about, and they're nervous about being alone in the dark or whatever. And so we have to work on managing stress and emotions by practicing deep breathing, really having calming routines as we enter those. So kids are able to fall asleep, and stress and emotions don't interfere with falling and staying asleep. And the last is, for many kids, it's technology. We have too many devices in rooms that are distractors to being awake. And so the more devices that are in the room and accessible the more they interfere with getting good sleep. And so when we think about what we can do as parents, we help them understand like reset's just a way to remember the things we can do to try to promote our kids' healthy sleep so they get the right amount and they get consistent sleep. They have a relatively consistent bedtime and wake time across each day of the week.
Yeah, so good. There's so many places, so many places I want to go with even just continuing to break that down. Like it was an example of like, it's not just the time that I go to bed and that routine, but also what about, what's an example of a getting ready for bed routine that you could like teach, because I think sometimes that would be an easy one to miss. It's like, all right, we're heading up to go to sleep, to go to bed. But what are some of those things that we know are helpful that help us get ready, as one example, as a part of that routine? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
What would be a couple examples of things?
It's a biological process. So the body can cue that bedtime's coming and the brain actually starts releasing melatonin. Even having a very purposeful change in clothes, going and starting to dim the lights down, you reduce stimulation. We have a place we go and we do a kind of a ritual or activity. The body begins to cue on that and it knows it's preparing to do the thing, which is sleep. And so that's when you start to create that predictable routine where we lessen and so forth. But sleep's just really kind of one core basic ingredient that is promotive of our mental health that we can do proactively and intentionally as a parent.
But how big? I'm just queuing in on that. That could be literally our whole convo here was just like, if that's not in place, good luck with the other strategies.
That's it. I feel like a lot of times people are physiologically or physically not in a place to be able to manage their life circumstances. And once you get the sufficient sleep, we all know this, you get good rest and you wake up, that thing it was really bugging you and that you thought was like your life was crumbling apart is no longer that big of a deal.
Yeah.
But yesterday it felt like a gigantic issue that was maybe insurmountable. Yeah. And so it is a huge piece to mental, because our minds and our feelings are physical things.
Yep.
They're part of us. And the degree that our physiology gets ramped up, we have a harder time managing our thoughts and feelings and behaviors, which is mental health. It's just our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors.
That makes sense. Well, before even going today, like I know that one of the things that many, because we talk, this transcends all ages, right? Not just like kids, but even adults, how important that part is. But I think about like a parent, I taught at the high school level for many years. And like, what if I'm seeing in my, teenager, could be any age, but let's just right now a teenager, and I'm seeing things that are worrying me about what I'm seeing. Maybe it is that affect piece that that you spoke about, or and so now I feel like I'm in that responding, not the proactive, but more of the reactive type of phase. Like, what do I do? What might be some things that I could be either paying attention to and or trying? Obviously, one thing you shared at the beginning is the number one way that we can teach is to role model ourselves, and we always got to remember that. But maybe speak to that before we go today on what if I am seeing some things that are worrying me about my kids' mental health right now and the way that they're responding or isolating themselves or withdrawing or all those different things.
Yeah, I think number one is recognize where your kid's at in development. Your kid's in a fundamental place of developmental reactance, and we need to handle that conversation and interaction in kind of a non-awkward kind of way in which they feel judged as something like, what's wrong with me? To really come from a normalizing conversation that we all struggle from time to time. Things get the best of our thoughts and emotions, and being able to lean and support others can be helpful. Usually not staring eye to eye at the teenager is a non-awkward way and creepy way to engage in a conversation. So through a car drive or a walk are ways to really open up younger people to conversations that could be difficult for them to have. And then, offer the, types of supports that they could use and practice skills. Like this could be an opportunity that when things seem big and they're really challenging and they start to get the best of us, the way we can start to get a handle on things is we can breathe and slow our breathing, because it tames our how intense our bodies feel. Or we can get our thoughts out and really look at them and see and challenge them and dispute them, because thoughts aren't fact. And so those are what we call cognitive restructuring skills. And the last thing there's two last pieces. connecting young people to other trusted, respected adults, because sometimes it's hard to be a prophet in your own land, and they might listen to another trusted, respected adult who can provide that support better than even a parent can because of the dynamics there. And we can get into that conversation.
Yep.
And the last is mental health intervention from a provider, a mental health provider. If your kid is struggling, that's why they exist. And everybody, in my view, can benefit from mental health care by an expert who knows how to help you get better at managing your thoughts and feelings and behaviors to get the most out of life. And yeah, some people really might need it because they're struggling, but really from a parenting standpoint, not look at it from a stigmatizing, but as a supportive process, and help enabling my kid to access mental health services from a trained provider, especially ones who deliver evidence-based practices like cognitive behavior therapy, are really effective supports that some teens need, because they are really struggling to get a handle on their thoughts and feelings to, engage fully in their life experiences. And so mental health services are really just like if a kid had an illness, you'd want to take them to the doctor. It's the same thing. We got to start looking at it not from a place where we failed or something's wrong with my kid, instead of just like, there's a support that's missing from my kid's experience right now that they could benefit from.
And how important, like you said, that if that is where I feel supports are needed, the approach to that, as you mentioned just a few moments ago, of that I'm really intentional with how that's coming across, that it's not that something's wrong with you, that this is very normal, that everybody deals with things and everybody could benefit, including me. And I wonder if I was the parent in that situation, my approach of like, I want to do this right alongside you. I need this, right? Like whatever it might be. What's the approach to that? Before you go though, you did mention, I think this is really good when you said like the tackling, even challenging our thoughts. What was it called? Cognitive restructuring?
That's the technical name, cognitive restructuring. It's the process of identifying, getting good. It's a skill, because you start to notice when you have an unhelpful thought. And if that thought dominated how I feel and behave, would that lead to good things for me? Well, then that's not a helpful thought. Their thoughts can be repurposed. What's a more helpful way? Even if it's a real challenging situation, what's a more helpful and productive way that I could be thinking about it? And we often, for young people, we say, if you were going to give advice to the person you love the most in response to that challenging situation, what advice would you give them? Now that's the thought that you need to make your own instead of the unhelpful one. And so we help kids get good at scrutinizing their thoughts so they don't dominate how they feel and behave, because that's what happens when we struggle. Our thoughts start getting the best of us. Our thoughts start to really energize our feelings. And if we start to feel really anxious or depressed, it impacts our behavior. So get good at managing our thoughts, we can start to tame our feelings. And if we can tame our feelings, we engage more fully in those parts of life that matter the most.
Yeah. And I know our time's probably up, like in the background, they're like, you got to turn this off, but let me just ask two real quick follow-up questions. That is an important part of that, the idea of when we talk about like restructuring those that, technical term, is it important to speak those out loud?
Yeah. Right? I mean, it's a getting out process, and it's a practicing process. So usually we have actually thought logs and we go through, and if I'm a parent, I'm going to model. I'm not going to sit there, well, you got like homework to do. I need to see you. Will you write out I'm going to just take them through real life. And, my daughters love it when I admit my fallibility, because then they get better at saying like, Dad, you get loud, don't you? Huh? Like, look at you. There you go again. Well, you got to, but I mean, being fallible and modeling and saying, look, okay, here's the unhelpful thoughts I'm having. I had today multiple times, and I had to really pause and notice them, or else they were going to dictate how I felt and function the rest of the day. And I would miss opportunities to get the most out of things. And I might say and do stuff that I regret, that don't align with who I want to be as a person.
Yep. No, it's good. And maybe this is a good closure, because there's so much, and it hopefully it leaves people wanting more. But I just think about one of the things I take from that, not only is the bigger overarching idea of the number one way we're going to teach is to role model. The other thing in that moment that I just cued in on is the idea of like, let's not make it when it gets to that moment as the first time that it seems like we're addressing it. Like where, you know, what if it's a regular practice for me as a parent to at the dinner table or when I get home and just a part of conversation, even bringing up more consistently, man, today I was really struggling with these thoughts, and it comes out more natural, and like just role modeling that, so that when we get to a moment where maybe your student, your child, you know, whoever is struggling with it, it's not foreign, it's not weird. You talk about this kind of thing all the time. So now it's more natural, not being done to them or that something is wrong. But I've earned that moment as a parent because this is a part of our practice. I role model this all the time. So I think there's a lot of obviously wisdom there. The other thing that I just really wanted to cue on, especially as kids get older, and I just said the very best, and I don't have a teenager yet, but I worked with a lot of them at the high school level. And a lot of times I was one of those people that were the parents who really were intentional. They would work through other mentors. And that takes humility. That idea of like, it's not always me. I'm going to work through this coach, this mentor, this whatever, understanding that I'll say the same thing 50 times. And you say it once and they listen to you. And it's like, well, yeah, there's a lot of reasons for that and the dynamics in play, but I don't want that to be missed either. I think a lot of times it's like, you're not in this alone. Who is it in their life that they are listening to? Who is it in their life that it would be a positive? And if it's not there, then how could we help to develop that, right? How could we help to develop some of those positive mentorships and others that aren't just you, the parent, right? But others that in many cases could be supporting that.
And schools are such a wealth of adults, availability of adults. If your parents really reached out and said, hey, I'm looking for someone in the school that could function in this role and, you know, provide a support outside of the home context, it would really be beneficial to my kid. And so really leveraging those natural places where the kid exists and the adults available in them is something that parents can do, you know, strategically, not in a form of manipulation, but in the best interest of supporting their kids' well-being, because an adult outside of the home is one of the most significant protective factors for the development of, you know, problems, adjustment problems for kids.
Yeah. So good. Well, once again, I don't want it to stop, but we'll push pause. I think there's so many things that when it feels like so much has been taken away in terms of control around me, there's so many things there that we just discussed that you shared that I could control in the sense of influence and put into action, even down to the idea of like flipping the script on my students, saying, if this was someone that you cared about most, what would you say to them if they were having these thoughts? For example, flipping that, what a practical strategy, different things that we can try, and some might take more than others in different ways, but I sure appreciate your time. You've always been a great resource. Thanks for always responding to my text messages if I'm freaking out as a parent.
You know, I sound like I know, but it, you know, as a parent, we all know there's humility in the process, and we're all constantly learning. Even when I have this knowledge base, it gives me stuff to go back to, but we all make mistakes. Right. And we learn how to best support our kids and be as proactive as possible. But when things don't go well, we react and try to do better the next time.
Yeah. And maybe this actually is the final note. Working with a lot of teenagers, I wonder so many times, just like as teachers, we try as parents maybe to be perfect. And I can't show my authenticity because what if I make a mistake or whatever? In reality, that's not helpful. What if we were able to be authentic? And I wonder if the most connecting moments and most helpful in terms of even to develop that like mental wellness is to bring that authenticity and to really role model what it means to respond from when I'm struggling. What did I need to do to respond to the struggles that I'm having, and being willing to share that with our student, obviously in a healthy, appropriate way, but just how important that authenticity piece is as well. And that's what they can connect with, because we all struggle and we all go through that. I can't connect with perfect, right? Or seemingly perfect. That's hard. It's pressure. That I need to be like that, which can't be helpful and supportive. So I love that angle on this conversation as well. Well, let's push pause. That was great, my friend. Thank you for taking time, Dr. Cook, and for all that you do to support schools and families. And thanks for being such a great role model as well for me as a parent.
Thanks for the opportunity.